I am Renee Smith-Maddox, and for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to Say Something. This is part of a bigger collaborative effort with me and my sister colleagues called Keeping It 100 Solution. Every Friday, every Friday, we just want to eke out a little bit of time to hear from you, from people who we don't hear from. We want to have conversations that we tend not to have, and we want to keep it real. This year, because boy, I think right now I could say Happy New Year. I could really say
Mhm.
Happy
Yes,
New Year.
yes.
Um, um,
Finally.
America is under new management. And I can say God is blessing America, whether you want to say God, the universe, the spirit, whatever you want to call that
Creator,
higher
whichever.
Yep,
deity.
yep.
Um, it,
Amen.
where hope is here, and several things happened this week that was amazing. Um, and I want to start off with at Mattel, it was Innovation Day, the day after inauguration, January 21st. And Barbie debuted its Maya Angelou doll in its
Ah,
Inspiring Women
Nice
collection.
collection. Yeah.
So something for you to know. And just a little tidbit, in 1993, poet and civil rights activist Dr. Maya Angelou was the first Black poet and the first female poet to speak at the US presidential inauguration. Days before, like on the 20th, we got introduced to Amanda Gorman, the
Mhm.
youngest poet to ever read. And I want to just say the last sentence of her beautiful, beautiful poem that spoke to every American. And she said, "The new day blooms. The new day blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." So that's how we're going to start, that we know a new dawn has bloomed. We want to use today's conversation to talk about the inauguration, um, the Biden and Harris administration. What does it mean to us? And we have some phenomenal, phenomenal women here today. But I want to start with my collaborators and let them greet everyone because it's been a minute since we've been live.
That's
So,
right.
um, Annalisa, please greet the
Hi, everyone. I'm Annalisa. I'm coming at you from LA. Happy New Year. I feel like I have exhaled. I can turn the news on again. We are good to go. So thank you so much for joining us.
Hi
Gabby.
everyone. Hi everyone. I'm Gabby coming at you from Houston, Texas. Happy New Year as well. We're so happy to be here and we have a great guest in store for you today.
And let me quickly go to our guests. We're going to be a little formal because I don't want to lose who's in the house with us today. We have Meacie Fairfax, who's an Associate Director of Strategic Research at EAB, an education firm headquartered in DC. Note, we wanted to have people who are in DC at today's show because we felt that they would be experiencing what we were seeing on TV very differently. I'm based in LA as well. So we wanted to hear up close and personal. And over the past decade, she worked in a variety of roles to support students' social, emotional, and academic support needs. Then we have Reva. Reva was born in DC and raised in DC, Maryland area. She has a background in immigration rights work, working on comprehensive immigration reform at the local, state, and federal level. And she brought this lens to the women's rights movement as well as the labor movement. She is currently working on diversity and inclusion efforts in the government. I got to talk to you, girl, where she strongly believes in building solidarity across groups as the means to affect the change. Well, I'm sure you welcomed the first, one of the few executive orders that President Biden wrote,
Oh
um,
yeah.
just rebuking, revoking, and turning back what was written by that previous individual
Exactly.
that was saying we could not at federal anything that was supported by federal funds, any contractors, any federal government, we could not do DEI training. We could not mention words like white privilege, and the list goes on. But I'm going to stop there, and I want to welcome the guests and thank you for saying yes. So it's all about us and this conversation. So inauguration, how did it make you feel? Let's just start there. You know, how did it hit you? Reva, you want to start?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. So, yeah, I woke up that morning and I turned on the TV. I wasn't kind of sure of what I was going to do, but I turned on the TV and I watched Trump basically fly off into the air, and then I decided it was time to go for a walk and breathe some fresh air and breathe DC's air a little bit more clean. Although I have to say, my friends and I were talking about how, we don't know how much sage it will take to actually really clean the city or the federal buildings, to be totally honest. I was like, do they make that much sage in the world? I do not know. but honestly, my dad actually came here to DC to teach at Howard University. And so we've got this connection to Howard University. Kamala Harris, when she won the election, I mean, my mom called me just crying, as an immigrant from India. She just could never have even imagined that she would live to see a Black South Asian woman become one of the most powerful women in the world. It was incredible. It was definitely a sigh of relief, but it's also in a time that's very difficult. But let's kind of enjoy the moment for a moment before we even reflect on the craziness from the preceding weeks. But
Meacie, jump on in.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very much the same, right? That was a strange morning. I don't know how I felt, right? It was one of those things where I had to take out our dog, and it was a little bit after 8, and I had expected, because I was watching, I expected that Trump had taken off and was gone already. But I heard the helicopter overhead, and I'm like, and I didn't know what it was at the time, and I was like, what is going on? I was like, oh God. Headed back into the house. I was excited, but at the same time, because of everything that happened with the riots, I still had this just tension and tightness in my gut that had just been, you can't describe what it had been over the last 4 years. I mean, it really was a high level of not only national trauma, but then actually being in the space where so much of it is happening. So when I ended up watching, I didn't intend to take the day off, but I did, because I just felt such an overwhelming sense of kind of I gotta watch this, and pride, because again, right, of just the first that were happening, but at the same time, had that sense of, we're still at the first, right? Why are we still here? Why does it take so long? Why can't we quite get this right? But I have to say that I was surprised at my kind of the emotional release that they had when I watched that, and I just teared up and was just so overwhelmed and overjoyed. Not to say, I don't want folks to think that, this symbolizes that we're post-racial, because obviously we still aren't, right? But I think a lot of folks, and honestly, if you want to think even a lot of white folks thought that when Obama came to the presidency, that there was that we were in a way post-racial, that we weren't. And I think what's wonderful is that we know that we're now up to this task and that we need to tackle it. And I think that's the overwhelming sense that came over me, and just kind of you can feel it wash over this town, because honestly, just to take it back back to November, when we got that information, when they were just shared, and finally got that Saturday when we got the news, people were in the streets dancing.
Yeah.
Everywhere, right? And it was just this waiting for this day. So it was just, I can't even put it in words.
Yeah, it was really amazing. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, because I mean, because DC is not a state. And so I usually will do early voting and then I'll campaign someplace. And so I actually went to North Carolina, and I've never actually experienced DC on election day, which is sad to me in some ways, but I'm like, I'm trying to, like win the other
Yeah.
states.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because yeah, like I was getting all these messages from my friends in DC, and they're like, everyone's like honking, everyone's at the White House, and and yet at the same time, the White House has become this barricaded, what used to be the people's house, like, and you really felt that under the Obama administration. There was this sense that this is the people's house. They welcomed advocates, activists. I mean, just everybody was kind of welcome in that White House. And it now is this militarized zone. And I mean, to be totally honest, when I went out on the streets, it's kind of like what you were saying, Meacie. I mean, there's this mixed feeling. You're having these mixed feelings and these conflicting feelings to some degree, where it was this sense of relief, but then also walking out on the street, I have never witnessed a militarized Washington, D.C. in the way that it is today. It wasn't even like this post September 11th, or like right after September 11th. There was not this level of National Guard presence, police presence, et cetera. And to see DC like that, and then even, listening to the news and hearing about Trump leaving, he left while doing a circle around Washington to see what the inauguration situation was, right? And it's like, are you for real? Like, are you really, like, are you going to say, oh, well, now, no one attended your inauguration, I had more people at mine? And it's like, yes, because there are more than 400,000 dead Americans because of your lack of attention to a severe virus that is killing our nation and the world.
And even to pick up off on that, because I'm in the upper Northwest, I'm a couple blocks from the National Cathedral. And so the tone that night where they did the 400 tolls of the bell was so solemn, and it just reverberated through your soul that the fact that was never mentioned. I mean, I get even emotional thinking about it. It's upsetting, especially, you think about and who's within our families, and a number of people and their friends and families and other ones you actually have who are in the ICU, who are struggling right now, who are on the front lines, who are dealing with this. And the fact that we just haven't had that same response, I think that's the part where you just go, I just can't believe that we have let this happen.
Yeah.
That was, I think, for me, one of the most poignant moments of the inauguration. That if you weren't kind of emotionally connected at that point, when they called for that moment of silence, and Meacie, as you said, gave voice and image like that, those lights going down, the reflecting pool to the monument, that was incredible to me to think about each one. What each one symbolizes 1,000 deaths or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was just so powerful. Both of you mentioned something that I kind of wanted to go back to as someone that watched this unfold, and quite honestly, as somebody that has been engaged in human rights work, what happened on January 6th with the riots, to me, was a long time coming. Fascism and the type of narcissistic behavior that Trump operated in was setting up the groundwork for this. How was it to be in DC, during that time and the days afterwards, leading up to the inauguration, maybe?
I would say, I was going to say, it kind of felt it almost stopped feeling like your home. I mean, I felt as if I was watching and looking at plates. I was kind of profiling and looking at the individuals who might be in the neighborhoods. And quite honestly, my husband and I actually had run-ins with a couple of people who got pretty aggressive, and he actually had to fight one of them off. So it was not a good place to be. And then even the day before, There was someone across the street from us who, from what we heard from our neighbors, it was someone who was affiliated with the Proud Boys. So it was real. It was not only palatable, but it was in your face. It was, it felt like a city under siege, that folks were trying to take this place back in a way that the unity and the love. I ended up, just quickly just saying, I moved here right at the end of Obama's administration. Wow. I mean, we used to watch when they would go up to pick up their children from the school up the street, completely different. And to see just the juxtaposition of where we were today, it was heart-wrenching.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I mean, I live closer to downtown. I'm like in the Logan Circle area. So like, 13th and Massachusetts Avenue, and literally the National Guard is like right outside my doorstep. So it's like where DC starts shutting down. And I walked out on January 6th, I walked out to grab some coffee and some breakfast, and what, that people were just walking down the street. People had rented Airbnbs in the neighborhood. And I live in a predominantly, it's kind of the LGBTQ neighborhood in DC. And so I was sort of shocked to see that there were all these people that had been staying in this neighborhood, but it was, a variety of Airbnbs, which Airbnb then, decided that they weren't going to have, that everything was shut down in DC. And yeah, I mean, I have to just say, I was like, it's very hard for me to not draw comparisons between 9/11 and January 6th, quite frankly, because after 9/11, South Asians and Muslims were just attacked. I mean, physically, hate crimes, etc. And my family was, we were terrorized essentially, and, experienced this constant heightened sense of fear. And I watched, first of all, the fact that there were Capitol Police that were complicit in the riots that happened there. And I was on Capitol Hill, and there was an article where they talked about the Capitol Police, like their boots kind of hitting the hallways, and like the hallways in the different Hill office buildings, they're really cacophonous, right? So like if you can hear the sound in the hallways. So I just remember 9/11 and hearing the Capitol Hill police running through the hallways and telling us to get out, and I felt this sense of safety because they were around, and then thinking back and being like, I'm terrified for my friends and other people that work there on the Hill. And the fact that they left the Capitol like they were leaving a tour of the Capitol. They were just like walking out the door, was infuriating to me in like multiple senses. Additionally, because now we as taxpayers are paying for the FBI to find them when they were right in front of police and officers who could have arrested them. And I don't know, I have so many levels of anger on that. I think they're terrorists. I think they should be treated the same way that foreign, terrorist organizations are treated. They should, Canada, I think, had noted that they were going to put the Proud Boys on their list of terrorist organizations. And I'm like, good, like, we need the FBI to be stronger on this stuff. And I think the 4 years of the Trump administration, it really just, it was disregarded, and like these offices were shut down instead of being bolstered, which they need to be now.
It's true. And honestly, I'm the cynic here, right? Like probably all of us, right? We all have a level of cynicism where we're just kind of like, what did it have to take? Did it have to take the hollowed white walls of our nation? Did it have to take the attack on our Congress, who was majority white? Like, it was one of those things where I was just like, what was the symbolism that had to get to that level to really, really wake people up and to get them angry and have a level of I mean, and it's not to say that it was or wasn't, but it just really, really hit me hard in that way, because so many people that I know were not surprised, but then there was still an equal measure that were shocked.
Yeah. And I mean, I have to say, Meacie, like I was appalled that, I mean, and just infuriated that, Ted Cruz and,
Ugh.
Josh Hawley, they
Yeah.
not only instigated this and voted against the, the credentialing of Biden as the victor of the election, but then Ted Cruz attends the inauguration, and
Yeah.
he's
Selfies.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What aren't you? How dare you even show your face at work ever again? And I'm like,
Yeah.
and this is actually, I think, the cynicism. It's like it just popped in my alerts that the Senate is going to delay the what's it called, hearing, the impeachment hearing on Trump for another couple of weeks, and they were saying so that his lawyers can get their evidence together. And I'm like, why do we give such space for for such relief and such space for white people, when I mean, sadly, like I was at the White House when the police and the military cleared the way for what's his name to do his Bible, when Trump did his
God.
Bible
That's right.
photo op.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I'm also just like, it's like, being in the middle of like all these different, pieces, especially, in DC, it's like you see this and you're constantly confronted with these people that are walking through the streets and going to restaurants, and you run into them, and it just, yeah. It's like,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Well,
Renee.
no,
I-
I'm just, we can be here. This could be a retreat, without a doubt. Because,
need some
ladies,
therapy on
Yes.
this for
yes,
sure.
you have unleashed, everything in terms of feeling, spirit, reality, breaking it down. And we can't thank you enough. With the time remaining, because one thing, Annalisa, Gabby, and we've been talking about, this is the year of activism and advocacy. And we really want to use this space to start to think about call to action. And in the few minutes that's remaining, we'd like for you to, help us think about, one thing, two things, three things, because when we all, I'm thinking, Reva, of the reality of the executive order and what that means, and how can we advance racial equity? How can we provide more support for marginalized communities, whether it's through the federal government or grassroots efforts, but we really want to be part of the solution. And so could you just sort of give us your thoughts on, it could be one item of call to action, and these call to actions we're going to post of, what do you need to do individually, collectively? What's your thoughts?
Meacie, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Sure. God, this. How much time do we got?
A minute.
Take your time. Take your time. The call is important.
It's true. It's like,
it's like, where do we start, right? Because this is the thing, right? Everyone talks about we're on this equity journey, right? And people are at different places. And I get that, right? But I have low tolerance for it. So for so many reasons. And part of me, I'm like, I want people to be courageous and brave in this work, right? I want you to embrace it in such a way that you've never done it before. I want you to break barriers and have conversations. I want you to start talking to your loved ones about this. I mean, I think that the reality is, and what we find out from being in like these urban centers, and depending on where you live, right? These where people are very progressive about rights and human dignity, that you can find those like-minded individuals, but we still have so many individuals who are still not, or on the fray, or think very differently about engaging with people across race, religion, sexuality, sexual orientation, go down the line, et cetera, et cetera. And so, my call to action would be this, like, stop not having the conversations. Have the conversations you need to have in this space. If you truly care about your families, your loved ones, and others who are outside of whatever your own identity may be, we need to kind of start pressure testing and having these larger dialogues, because the reality is everybody has chosen sides, out of fear, and not out of like a larger collective of bringing us and unifying us together. So I think my larger call to action is just, I'm keeping it pretty basic here. It's about just to keep having that dialogue and have those conversations. Push yourself, push your colleagues, push your family, friends, your coworkers, and others. I'll just briefly say, and the last thing I'll say too as well is just like, be okay with failing too, right? We're all trying to figure this out, and we all have been socialized in such a way that is not helpful. And we're all trying to relearn the way to embrace each other and all of our identities. So I'll just leave it at that.
That's amazing. I 100% would agree with both of those. I mean, I have gotten so comfortable with failing right now because I'm working in the government on D&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And there's no framework for it. There's no, it's like creating things from new. I think my call to action is a couple things. I think kind of carrying off of what Meacie was saying, in terms of, I do believe that these conversations are incredibly important. And I think that if you like, be uncomfortable, be okay with being uncomfortable in these positions. You don't need to know everything. I mean, part of this work is understanding that we all have to learn, and we all have to learn about each other and from one another. And so I might say something wrong, and I count on people to say, hey, that's not the right way to address me, or that's not the right way to do it. And I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry. It was not my intention. Please teach me, and I appreciate that learning in the same way that I give it back to people. But be okay to be uncomfortable. Be okay in sitting in discomfort. I also think that I'm a big believer in accountability right now as well. Yes. And I am so livid at, like, there's accountability in two ways that I really want to address right now. Liberal white people who are just do-gooders and feel like this is the right thing to do right now, and yet take over and are not really interested in action and in understanding their role and understanding what action means for them and in different spaces. And so question them. Like, I am engaging my office in a conversation about white allyship and utilizing a lot of different tools to, sort of have people understand that instead of, like, what does it mean to share space in the United States? Because you've never had to share space with people of color. And so it's like instead of saying, oh, she got that job because she was a woman of color, or he got that job because of X, Y, and Z. No, you were not qualified enough for that job, So like, hold people accountable and have these conversations. I mean, with question white people, I think, is that piece. And then the other piece of accountability, I swear to God, these members of Congress, these white men, the men who and the women who attack the Capitol are terrorists, and they should be treated as such. Yep. They should be removed from office. They should not be serving, quite frankly. So write your members of Congress, writing your members of Congress and saying, we need to hold these people accountable. Your governors, right? Various elected officials, really, let's start, like, raising a ruckus about it. There are some members of Congress on the Hill right now that are about that, but I gotta say, I'll be damned if, like, these people are going to get away with it. And I feel like the cynical side in me is like, it's just going to happen. But I'm so infuriated. I'm like, it cannot. So, let's as much as possible hold people accountable.
Renee, I'm going to jump in with my call to action because I want to just kind of add it to what Reva said. These members, but also, the law enforcement, the former military, right, that
Yeah.
participated.
Mhm.
Yes.
We former military, there's so that still in the system should not be getting pensions and things like that for the insurrection that they engaged in, and other ways that we're really looking at. And we've talked about it a lot in the show before. You cannot heal until there is justice. You just cannot.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that is really, I felt President Biden's use of the word reconciliation was so fitting, because he has a deep faith, right? And in that faith,
Mhm.
reconciliation means forgiveness with accountability. So
Mhm.
that
Yes.
accountability is what we can't forget. My other call to action is, with this new president and this new administration, there is a bill on the congressional floor, HR 8313, the Philippine Human Rights Act. And I urge you to tell your public officials to support this act. What it will do is it will remove support of the United States to President Duterte in the Philippines,
Mm.
who is
Mhm.
just as bad and
Mhm.
even worse as former President Trump was. And I think
Mhm.
it sends a message to the international community about Trump's cronies, that they
Crumps.
should
He's a
watch out.
crump.
Yeah. That this is a wider, broader fight into the international space.
Can I actually
Gabby?
tag on one more
Yeah.
thing? Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
know,
Go ahead.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
no.
I'm like,
Yeah, no, same, exactly the same. I was like civic and engaged participation in everything that's going on. I mean, I think the one wonderful thing is that over the last 4 years, people have been so hyper engaged, because there are so many harmful policies and things that were being passed down. So I want folks to still continue to be engaged. The best thing about everything that has happened is that now we know who these individuals are who are standing up and saying, I'm for white supremacy, I'm for this. And I'm picking back on what you said, Ray, that like we have to hold them accountable. And if we want to have this where we have the makeup of the individuals who are representing us look like America, look like truly what America looks like, we have to continue to push to have those conversations internally with our families and with loved ones about what that looks like. What is actually, does it mean to be an engaged citizen?
yeah.
Yeah,
And actually, one other thing that I wanted to tag on to what Annalisa said is one of the big priorities that the Biden administration is going to be dropping in terms of legislation is on immigration. And the immigrant rights in the bill is one of the most progressive bills that has been put out on immigration. And we also need to hold Democrats to the fire. The Democrats have control of the Senate, the House, and the President and the White House. And so there is no excuse for us to not finally, after I've been working on this issue for decades, and we have not seen comprehensive immigration reform since the mid 90s. And so this is just outrageous. It needs to happen. And so again, reach out to members of Congress as soon as the bill drops and make sure that, we're holding people accountable for the humane, dignified treatment of immigrants. Sorry, Gabby, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, that's very important. I'm so glad you shared that, because one of the themes or my takeaways from this episode is how it's generational, right? Like when you shared that your mom cried when Kamala, or Madame Vice President Kamala, was elected, like I just couldn't help but think about our next generation and what history is unfolding in their eyes right now. And so my call to action is for anyone who has engagement with the next generation is to continue to have these conversations, because they are our next leaders. I don't know who's in control of our history books, but this might be erased and we can't let it erase, be erased. So continue to have those conversations. In our website, we have resources on lesson plans for any educators or parents who have become educators during this time, on how to have these critical conversations with your young ones.
Well, ladies, we have been so engaged in this show, we have gone over time, and,
That's okay.
but out of necessity. What you have done is you have also launched our call to action series. Much has been said, and I could tell you I am total in alignment in everything that is said. So what we want to continue to do is to use the Say Something space and the Keeping It 100 solution platform as a way to push out these call to actions, because Americans can be fair weather. We can forget real soon about
Yeah.
what has happened. And we tend not to want to roll up our sleeves and really do the work that needs to be done over the long haul, not just on the day, not just hitting the submit button for a donation. And so we are not there. The marathon training has just started. So to all of our listeners, we want you to stay engaged, to be informed, to be disciplined about this work. This work meaning really preserving the democracy, defining what it means to be a democracy, to really think about racial equality, and not just think about it, but understand it, and in every way possible, consider the ways we can collectively advance racial equality and racial justice. The time has come. Ladies, thank you. What a joy. What a blessing. We are in gratitude for your presence. And we look forward to staying connected. For that, we're going to say peace out and thank you for joining us.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And
Thank you.
Renee, thank you. And Renee, I wanted to say one last thing. Yesterday, we lost a member of our Keeping It 100 family, Councilwoman Dr. Carla Thornton, whose daughter was one of our empowered girls over the summer. And so, Coral, our hearts are out with you, and whatever you need, you know, we are thinking of you in our prayers and our thoughts. Love to your family. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.